I traced my fingers across my wedding ring as I watched my husband walk out of our bedroom. 20 minutes later, I was in our neighbor's arms, crossing a line I couldn't uncross. The most terrifying part? For that one breathless moment, I didn't care. My name is Emma. 7 years of marriage to Michael had slowly eroded into a beautifully maintained facade, the pristine colonial home in a quiet suburb, the successful husband whose career demanded his presence in cities far from mine, and the lonely wife whose smile never quite reached her eyes. I had become an expert at pretending, even to myself. That April afternoon, I stood at our bay window, a coffee cup warming my palms as I watched him arrive. Jack had moved in next door 3 months ago, but we'd barely exchanged more than polite nods. The moving truck had departed weeks ago, yet boxes still cluttered his driveway. I observed him unloading groceries, his forearms flexing with each movement. When he glanced up and caught me watching, I didn't look away. The glass between us fogged slightly with my breath as something electric passed through the space between our homes. I wiped the condensation with my fingertip, drawing an invisible line that disappeared as quickly as my resolve. The storm came 2 days later, violent and unexpected. Michael had left that morning for a week-long conference in Seattle, his goodbye kiss landing somewhere between my cheek and ear as I pretended to sleep. The backyard fence partially collapsed under the assault of wind and rain, and I was struggling with the splintered wood when I heard his voice. "Need some help with that?" Jack stood on his side of the broken barrier, rain plastering his white t-shirt against his chest. Water droplets clung to his eyelashes as he smiled, that simple expression somehow warming me despite the chill. "If you don't mind getting soaked," I called back, pushing wet strands of hair from my face. He crossed over easily, taking the hammer from my hand. Our fingers brushed, and I felt the calluses on his palm, so different from Michael's smooth, manicured hands. Jack's movements were efficient and assured, muscles shifting beneath his rain-drenched shirt as he worked. I held boards in place, my fingers occasionally touching his as we repositioned planks. Each contact sent a small current through my skin. "There," he said finally, raindrops running down his neck and disappearing beneath his collar. "Should hold now. Let me get you something warm," I offered, already turning toward the house. "It's the least I can do." On my porch, I handed him a towel. He ran it over his hair, leaving it charmingly disheveled. Watching his throat move as he sipped the hot chocolate I prepared, I became intensely aware of the sound of rain hitting the roof above us, creating a private world where only we existed. "How long have you been married?" he asked suddenly, nodding toward my ring. 7 years, I answered, unconsciously twisting the band. "Michael travels a lot for work. Must get lonely." The directness of his observation startled me. No one ever acknowledged the solitude that had become my constant companion. I looked away, watching raindrops trace patterns down the porch column. "Sometimes," I admitted softly, surprising myself with the confession. That evening I baked chocolate chip cookies, the aroma filling my empty house with a warmth that had nothing to do with the oven's heat. I arranged them carefully on a blue plate, telling myself neighbors did this all the time. Jack answered his door in low-hanging sweatpants and a faded university t-shirt. His feet were bare against the hardwood, and something about that vulnerability made my chest tighten. "Emma," he said, my name sounding different in his voice. "This is unexpected." I stood in his doorway, plate extended between us like a shield. "Just wanted to thank you for your help earlier." He stepped back, creating space for me to enter. "Would you like to come in?" I hesitated at the threshold, feeling the weight of the choice before me. One step forward, one decision that seemed simultaneously significant and insignificant. His house was a mirror image of mine, yet entirely different: darker woods, leather furniture, walls still awaiting personal touches. "Just for a minute," I said, stepping inside. We sat in his kitchen, cookies untouched between us as conversation flowed with surprising ease. When I laughed at something he said, he watched my face with such intensity that my laughter faded into something quieter, heavier. I should go, I said, standing abruptly. His fingers grazed mine as he walked me to the door. Thanks for the cookies. And the company. I felt his eyes on me as I walked across our adjoining lawns, my skin tingling despite the distance between us. The next afternoon found us in my backyard, trimming overgrown bushes that Michael had been promising to attend to for months. Jack had appeared with garden shears and an offer I couldn't refuse. The sun beat down mercilessly, causing sweat to bead along his hairline and darken his gray t-shirt. I found myself watching the rhythmic movement of his shoulders, the careful precision of his hands. You missed a spot, I said, reaching to point out a stray branch. Our arms brushed. He turned, bringing our faces unexpectedly close. Time suspended as neither of us moved away. I could count his eyelashes, see the flecks of amber in his brown eyes, feel his breath against my cheek. My pulse pounded in my ears as I took a deliberate step back, my sundress clinging to my damp skin. I think we need water, I managed, voice slightly higher than normal. It's too hot out here. In the kitchen, I filled glasses with ice water, the cubes clicking against glass like a warning. When I turned, he was standing closer than I expected. Our fingers touched as I handed him the glass. A drop of condensation traveled from the rim, sliding slowly down to where his thumb pressed against the surface. Thank you, he said, eyes never leaving mine as he drank. I watched his throat work as he swallowed, a bead of sweat trailing down his neck and disappearing beneath his collar. The glass trembled slightly in my hand. That night, Michael called. His voice sounded distant, words about meetings and clients washing over me as I stared at the ceiling, tracing shadows that danced across it from passing headlights. Are you listening, Emma? He asked, irritation edging his voice. Of course, I lied, closing my eyes. Just tired. After we hung up, I stood at my bedroom window, curtains partially drawn. Across the short expanse of lawn, Jack's lights were still on. I watched his silhouette move past his window and wondered if he could see me too, standing in darkness watching. 3 days later, Jack knocked on my door, a bottle of wine in hand. Found this when unpacking. Thought you might help me enjoy it. I should have said no. Instead, I stepped aside, letting him in as easily as I was letting go of my better judgment. The wine was rich and smooth, warming me from the inside as evening shadows lengthened across my living room floor. Music played softly from my phone, something slow and melancholy that Michael would have changed immediately. Jack sat beside me on the couch, the cushion dipping under his weight, bringing us imperceptibly closer. Why did you move here? I asked, curling my legs beneath me, aware of how the movement caused my dress to ride slightly higher on my thighs. Fresh start, he said, his gaze following the rim of his glass as he rotated it slowly. Divorce. The word hung between us, heavy with implication. He looked up, catching me studying his face. What happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She said I wasn't there enough. His laugh held no humor. I was always there. She was the one who left, long before she actually moved out. The parallel to my own marriage wasn't lost on me. I reached out, intending a comforting touch on his arm, but my hand lingered longer than it should have. His skin was warm beneath my fingertips. And you? He asked. Are you happy, Emma? No one had asked me that question in years. The wine, the darkening room, the gentle pressure of his gaze. They all conspired to loosen the careful restraint I'd maintained. I don't remember what that feels like anymore, I admitted, the truth spilling out before I could reconsider. He set his glass down, turning toward me. His knee brushed against mine, the contact sending heat up my thigh. That's not an answer. No, I whispered. I'm not happy. The confession hung in the air between us, transforming the atmosphere. His eyes dropped to my lips, then back to meet my gaze. I knew what would happen next. I knew I should stop it. I didn't. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing gently across my lower lip. I leaned into his touch, eyes closing as his mouth found mine. The kiss was tentative at first, a question. When I answered by threading my fingers through his hair, pulling him closer, it changed, becoming hungry, desperate. My back pressed against the arm of the couch as he leaned over me, one hand braced beside my head, the other tracing a path from my knee up my thigh, leaving fire in its wake. I arched into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against mine. When his lips traveled to my neck, I gasped, my hands clutching his shoulders. We shouldn't, I breathed, even as I tilted my head to give him better access. Tell me to stop, he murmured against my collarbone, his breath hot against my skin. I couldn't form the words. Instead, I guided his face back to mine, capturing his mouth in another kiss as his fingers worked at the buttons of my dress. Each one that came undone felt like another step away from the woman I thought I was, toward someone I didn't recognize. The living room lamp cast long shadows across us as clothing was discarded, piece by piece. His hands explored me with reverent attention, discovering places that hadn't been touched with such care in years. When he whispered my name against my skin, it sounded like a prayer. Afterward, we lay tangled together, the throw blanket from the couch pulled hastily over us. His heartbeat gradually slowed beneath my cheek. Reality began its unwelcome return, bringing with it the weight of what we'd done. I should go, he said finally, but made no move to leave. I nodded, already missing his warmth though he hadn't yet departed. When the front door closed behind him, I stood in the silent house, my body still humming with the memory of his touch, my mind beginning its spiral into guilt. Morning brought no clarity, only a text message that made my heart race. I can't stop thinking about you. I stared at the screen, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Can I see you tonight? Yes, I typed, sending the single word before I could change my mind. The pattern was established. During the day, I maintained my routine, running errands, calling my mother, preparing dinner that I would ultimately throw away untouched. At night, Jack would come over, or I would go to his house, and we would lose ourselves in each other. With each encounter, I told myself it would be the last time. I lied to myself as easily as I lied to Michael during our nightly calls, answering his distracted questions with equally hollow responses. I miss you, Michael said one evening, surprising me with the sentiment. I clutched the phone tighter, guilt washing over me. I miss you too, I replied, and was startled to realize it wasn't entirely untrue. I missed the idea of us, what we had been before distance and neglect had created the chasm between us. Michael wasn't supposed to return until Friday, but the sound of his key in the door Thursday afternoon froze me in place. I was in the kitchen, quickly closing the message thread with Jack on my phone. Michael! I called out, my heart hammering against my ribs. He appeared in the doorway, suitcase still in hand. Flight got canceled. Thought I'd surprise you. I forced a smile, crossing the room to embrace him, wondering if he could feel the rapid beat of my guilty heart. It's good to see you. That night, as Michael slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my body rigid with tension. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from Jack. I silently slipped out of bed and into the bathroom, locking the door before reading it. Your light is on. Can't sleep either. I pressed my forehead against the cool mirror, eyes closing as shame washed over me. What had I become? I typed a quick response. Michael came home early. We need to talk tomorrow. The next morning, Michael was unusually attentive, making coffee and asking about my week. I answered carefully, avoiding specifics, feeling like an actress performing a role. "You seem different," he said suddenly, studying my face across the breakfast table. "Different how?" I asked, focusing intently on stirring my coffee. "I don't know. Just different." I glanced up, meeting his gaze, searching for signs that he knew. His expression was curious, perhaps slightly concerned, but not suspicious. "Not yet. I've just been thinking a lot while you were gone," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. The gesture, so rare lately, nearly undid me. "About what?" "About us," I admitted softly. "About how distant we've become." Michael's expression softened. "I know I've been away a lot. It's been hard on both of us." The sincerity in his voice pierced through my carefully constructed justifications. For the first time in weeks, I truly looked at my husband, the slight circles under his eyes, the new lines around his mouth, the gray beginning to appear at his temples. Had he been suffering too in his own way? Later that afternoon, while Michael was showering, I slipped out to meet Jack in the neutral territory of a coffee shop 3 blocks away. The small cafe was busy enough that we wouldn't be noticed, yet quiet enough for the conversation we needed to have. He was already there when I arrived, a cup cooling untouched before him. When he looked up and saw me, his face brightened, then immediately fell as he registered my expression. "Michael's home," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. "I know," he replied, his fingers tapping nervously against his mug. "What happens now?" I stared at my hands, at the wedding ring that suddenly felt heavier than it had in years. "This has to stop, Jack." "Because he's home?" The edge in his voice surprised me. "He'll leave again, Emma. He always will." "That's not the point," I said, though his words struck a painful chord. "What we're doing, it's wrong." "It didn't feel wrong when you were in my bed last night," he countered, leaning forward. "It felt like the most right thing in the world." I closed my eyes, remembering the intensity of our connection, the way he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. Physical chemistry isn't the same as right and wrong. "So that's all this is to you?" "Physical." His question hung between us. The truth was more complicated than I wanted to admit. In the silence, a barista called out an order, the normalcy of the moment at odds with the turmoil inside me. "I made vows, Jack," I finally said, voice barely audible. "Whatever problems Michael and I have, I owe it to both of us to try to fix them before I throw away 7 years. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "And what do you owe yourself, Emma?" "Happiness, passion, being truly seen." I pulled my hand away, the touch too dangerous, too tempting. "I can't be the kind of woman who cheats on her husband and lives with herself." "But you already have been," he said softly, the truth of his words hitting me like a physical blow. I stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "I'm sorry, Jack. I truly am. But I need to try to save my marriage." The walk home was a blur, tears threatening but never quite falling. When I entered the house, Michael was in the living room, the same room where Jack and I had first crossed the line. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Where did you go?" Michael asked, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. "Just needed some air," I said, shedding my coat. "To clear my head." He nodded, accepting the half-truth. "I've been thinking about what you said this morning. About us growing distant." I sat beside him, maintaining a careful few inches between us. "And you're right," he said simply. "I've been so caught up in building my career that I forgot why I was doing it in the first place." He turned to face me fully. "For us, Emma. For our future." His sincerity was overwhelming. I had been ready for defensiveness, for the familiar cycle of accusations and justifications that had characterized our recent arguments. This vulnerability was something new, or perhaps something very old, something we'd lost along the way. "I want to try," I whispered, tears finally spilling over, "to find our way back to each other." Michael reached out, gently wiping a tear from my cheek. "Me too." That evening, a knock at the door sent ice through my veins. I knew without checking that it would be Jack. Michael was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, another surprise in a day full of them. "I'll get it," I called, heart racing as I moved to the door. Jack stood on the porch, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability that made my chest ache. "Emma, please, we need to talk." I stepped outside, pulling the door nearly closed behind me. "Jack, you can't be here. I just need to know if you meant what you said earlier," he pressed, taking a step closer. "Everything all right out there?" Michael's voice called from inside. "Just a neighbor," I called back, panic rising. To Jack I whispered urgently, "Please go. I can't do this right now." "Who is it?" Michael asked, appearing behind me. I felt caught between two worlds, the ground beneath me threatening to give way. "This is Jack," I said, voice remarkably steady. "He just moved in next door." "Jack, this is my husband, Michael." The two men sized each other up, an unspoken current passing between them. Did Michael sense something? Could he see the guilt written across my face? "Nice to meet you," Michael said, extending his hand. "Emma mentioned you helped with the fence during that storm last week. I appreciate you looking out for her while I was away." The irony of his gratitude was almost too much to bear. Jack shook Michael's hand, his expression carefully neutral. "Just being neighborly." After an excruciating minute of small talk, Jack left, casting one last loaded glance my way before disappearing across the lawn. I closed the door, leaning against it for support. "Seems like a nice guy," Michael commented as we returned to the kitchen. "Yes," I managed, focusing intently on setting the table. "He is." That night, lying beside Michael in the darkness, I realized how close I had come to destroying everything. His breathing had evened out in sleep, his arm draped casually across my waist, a familiar weight that now felt like both anchor and accusation. I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the harsh fluorescent light. Who was this woman looking back at me? The one who had been willing to risk her marriage for stolen moments of passion? Or the one who had been slowly disappearing inside a relationship that had lost its center? Tears slid silently down my cheeks as I confronted the mess I'd made. It wasn't just about Michael or Jack. It was about me, about the parts of myself I'd silenced and ignored until they grew so desperate for acknowledgement that they led me wildly astray. The next morning, I made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Laurel, whose office was a 20-minute drive from our neighborhood. In that first session, sitting on an uncomfortable leather couch, I poured out everything: the loneliness, the affair, the crushing guilt, and the fear that I had damaged my marriage beyond repair. "What do you want, Emma?" she asked after I'd exhausted my confessions. "To go back and undo it all," I said immediately. She smiled sadly. "That's not possible. What do you want moving forward?" I considered her question carefully. "I want to understand why I did this. I want to know if my marriage can be saved. I want to be whole again." "Those are good places to start," she nodded. "But at some point, you'll need to decide whether to tell Michael about the affair." The thought sent panic through me. "I can't. It would destroy him. Destroy us." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But relationships built on secrets have cracks in their foundations. They may stand for years, but they're always vulnerable to collapse." Her words followed me home, echoing in my mind as Michael and I cautiously circled each other, both trying to rebuild what had fractured between us. He made more effort to be present, calling more frequently when he traveled, even discussing the possibility of reducing his business trips. I made efforts too, asking about his work with genuine interest, suggesting weekend activities we used to enjoy together, creating space for intimacy that had been missing for too long. 2 weeks after Michael's return, I saw Jack at the local grocery store. Our carts nearly collided at the end of an aisle, a near miss that felt symbolic. He looked tired, shadows beneath his eyes that mirrored my own sleepless nights. "Emma," he said, my name still sounding different in his voice. "Jack," I replied, gripping my cart handle tightly. "How are you?" "Managing," he answered, eyes searching mine. "And you? How's the reconciliation going?" I winced at the edge in his tone. "We're working on it. It's complicated. Love usually is," he said, the fight seeming to drain from him. "I'm selling the house." The news hit me harder than expected. "What? Why?" He laughed without humor. "You really need to ask? I can't live next door to you, watching you rebuild your marriage, knowing what we had." "Jack, don't apologize," he interrupted. "We both made choices. I just need to make a different one now." I nodded, understanding all too well the need for escape. "Where will you go?" "Denver, probably. My company has an office there." He hesitated, then added softly, "Be happy, Emma, whether it's with him or eventually with someone else. Just don't settle for less than you deserve." His kindness was almost harder to bear than his anger would have been. I watched him walk away, feeling a complicated mix of loss and relief. That evening, sitting across from Michael at dinner, I made a decision. The secret between us felt like a wall I could no longer bear. "I need to tell you something," I said, setting down my fork. "Something I'm not proud of." Michael looked up, concern creasing his brow. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "While you were away on your last trip, I was unfaithful." The words hung in the air, impossible to take back. Michael's expression froze, then crumpled in slow motion. "What?" "I had an affair," I continued, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "With Jack, our neighbor." Michael stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "How long?" "A week," I whispered. "It's over now." "Completely over." He paced the kitchen, hands running through his hair. "Why are you telling me this? To ease your conscience? To hurt me? Because I want us to have a real chance," I said, tears streaming down my face. "And I don't think we can with this secret between us." "A real chance," he repeated bitterly. "After you slept with another man in our home? While I was working to support us." Each word was a deserved lash. I didn't try to defend myself or explain the loneliness, the neglect, the slow death of intimacy between us. None of that justified what I'd done. "I'll leave," I said, finally standing. "Give you space to think." "No," Michael said sharply. "I need air." "I'll go." He walked out, the front door closing with controlled restraint behind him. I sank back into my chair, the silence of the house pressing in around me. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. I sat in the darkness of our living room waiting. Finally, near dawn, the door opened. Michael looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped. "I walked for hours," he said, remaining standing while I sat frozen on the couch. "Tried to understand how we got here." "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the words entirely inadequate. "I'm not blameless," he said, surprising me. "I've been absent. Not just physically. I stopped seeing you, really seeing you, a long time ago." Hope flickered, fragile but present. "Does that mean?" "I don't know what it means yet," he said, sinking into the armchair across from me. "I love you, Emma. 7 years isn't something I can just throw away. But I don't know if I can get past this." "I understand," I said, though the possibility of losing him for good opened a chasm inside me that felt bottomless. "I need time," he continued. "And if we have any chance, we need help. Professional help." I nodded quickly. "I've already started seeing someone. A therapist. We could go together." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always a step ahead. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Michael moved into the guest room, creating a physical manifestation of the gulf between us. We began couples therapy, sitting stiffly side by side on Dr. Laurel's couch, excavating years of neglect and miscommunication. "When did you first notice the distance between you?" she asked during our third session. Michael and I exchanged glances, a rare moment of connection. "After the miscarriage," he said quietly, naming the loss we'd both avoided discussing for 2 years. I inhaled sharply, the memory still raw. "You buried yourself in work. And you buried yourself in silence," he countered, not unkindly. "I didn't know how to reach you. I didn't know how to be reached," I admitted, tears threatening. Slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild. Not the same marriage we'd had before, but something new, something more honest. Michael reduced his travel schedule, and I started freelance writing work that had been a dormant dream for years. Jack moved away as promised. The for sale sign came down from his yard, replaced by a young family with a toddler and a golden retriever. Occasionally, I felt a pang when passing his former house, but it lessened with time. One evening, 6 months after my confession, Michael and I sat on our back porch, watching fireflies rise from the lawn as twilight deepened. A comfortable silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of children playing further down the street. "I forgive you," he said suddenly, his voice quiet but clear. I turned to look at him, moonlight silvering his profile. "Michael, not for you," he clarified, reaching for my hand. "For me." Carrying the anger and hurt. It was exhausting. I interlaced my fingers with his, feeling the familiar contours of his palm against mine. "Where do we go from here?" He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. "Forward, I think. Just forward." Later that night, he joined me in our bedroom for the first time since I'd confessed. We moved carefully around each other, the familiar routine of preparing for bed now fraught with new meaning. When he slipped under the covers beside me, his hand found mine in the darkness. "I've missed you," he whispered, the words encompassing far more than the recent physical separation. "I've missed us," I replied, turning toward him. His fingers traced the curve of my cheek, tentative and gentle. When his lips met mine, it wasn't with the desperate passion Jack and I had shared, but with something deeper, something tempered by pain and forgiveness. The moonlight spilled through our partially open curtains as we rediscovered each other. His hands moved with deliberate care, as if mapping territory both familiar and new. When I arched against him, a soft sound escaping my lips, he paused, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. "Are you sure?" he asked, vulnerability raw in his voice. I answered by drawing him closer, threading my fingers through his hair. Afterward, I rested my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, raising goosebumps in their wake. "We're going to be okay," he murmured, the words part statement, part question. I propped myself up on my elbow to look at him. Really look at him. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the fullness of his mouth, the gray at his temples I'd first noticed months ago. This was the man I'd chosen, the one I'd nearly lost through my own actions and our mutual neglect. "Yes," I said with quiet certainty. "We're going to be okay." The affair had broken something between us, something that had seemed irreparable. But in that breaking, we'd found our way to a deeper truth. That love isn't just about passion or comfort or shared history. It's about the choice to see each other, truly see each other, every day. to rebuild when things fall apart, to forgive when forgiveness seems impossible. As Michael's breathing deepened into sleep, his arm draped protectively across my waist, I thought about the woman I'd been before, hungry for connection, desperate to feel alive. I didn't judge her anymore. She had made a terrible mistake, yes, but that mistake had forced us to confront the slow death of our marriage before it was too late. The moonlight cast silver patterns across our tangled sheets. Outside, a gentle spring rain began to fall, washing away the last remnants of winter. I closed my eyes, listening to its steady rhythm on the roof, feeling Michael's heartbeat against my cheek. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't and might never be, but because we were present in our imperfection, awake to each other again, choosing each other with open eyes. The space between us, once vast enough to allow another person to slip in, had narrowed to something intimate and sacred. I traced my finger along Michael's jawline as he slept, remembering how I'd once traced my wedding ring, feeling trapped by its circle of gold. Now it felt like a promise renewed, a commitment deepened by fire. I choose you, I whispered to his sleeping form. Every day I choose you. Outside, the rain continued to fall, cleansing and renewing as we slept in each other's arms. Two imperfect people who had nearly lost everything, now finding their way back to each other, one honest moment at a time.